My guest today is the music director of the Knoxville Symphony Orchestra. Aram, I'm so happy that you're here, Demirjian. And when I tell you, you're going to take us behind the scene on what it means to be a part of classical music, especially as somebody who has such a deep love for it. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I will do my best.
No, I'm excited about this because you bring an excitement to classical music here in Knoxville with a lot of new programming with the Symphony Orchestra. And I think you're starting to have that excitement kind of bleed over to the East Tennessee area. So first, let's just talk about how does one become a conductor?
Wow. How much time do we have?
Right. I need to know, how do we get to this?
Well, there's no single pathway to becoming a conductor. I mean, I think the starting point for everybody is you're making music from a very young age, and you're either playing an instrument or singing, and it's something that brings you a great deal of joy. For me personally, I grew up in a musical household. My parents were both very serious. It would be doing them a disservice to call them amateur musicians. They didn't make their primary profession doing music, but they were still very, very serious. My father is a violinist, my mother a pianist and a singer, and still conducts our church choir. And then my older sister, who is a journalist herself professionally now actually, is also an excellent pianist, violinist, and singer herself. So music was kind of a fact of life for me growing up. I started off on piano, and then I started off on piano when I was 3.
When you were 3?
When I was 3. And then when I was 6 years old, I was 7 years old, I wanted to switch over to cello because I wanted to be like Yo-Yo Ma. Yo-Yo Ma,
yes.
At first, he was somebody who was on Sesame Street in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and just his whole presence, his whole vibe was so inviting and welcoming and warm and fun. And then I actually was in the same kindergarten class as his daughter, so he was the chaperone for my school field trips.
Wait, are you serious?
I am totally serious. Yeah, and so cello was the instrument that I wanted to play because I wanted to be like him, and in a lot of ways, I still want to be like him because you were talking about something that makes music, classical music, exciting. It's the people performing it, wanting to make a genuine and welcoming connection to the people in the audience, to the people out in the community. And in a lot of ways, I wasn't coming in here expecting to talk about Yo-Yo Ma, but in a lot of ways, he was like the first model for me in terms of, if you're a performer, how are you interacting with the people that are listening to your music? And first and foremost, are you making them the most important thing? So started playing cello at 7, played in youth orchestra when I was in high school, and sang in choirs for my basically entire childhood. And the first time I caught the conducting bug, it was the first time I was playing in a full youth symphony orchestra. I was 14 years old. And we were playing Dvorak's New World Symphony. And I remember there was this kind of moment where everything kind of slowed down. It was a period of like 24 bars of rest where I wasn't playing. And I just kind of looked around the room. And I saw there were 100 kids in this orchestra. And it probably sounded like chaos, but I was looking around and everybody was putting a lot of energy, each into their own part, and all these different sounds, and yet out of this kind of chaos, there was harmony that was coming out of it. And I loved that phenomenon. And I became fascinated with the inner workings of an orchestra. And over the course of my teenage years, I started, looking at the conductor and thinking, why is he or she, making that comment? Why are they not commenting on this thing that I hear that I think is could be different over here? And I start putting myself in the head of the conductor, and I start doing pretty much what any person who's curious about conducting starts doing. I start buying orchestra scores and standing in front of the stereo, waving my hands to the soundtrack from Star Wars, and and then eventually, if any conductor is being honest with you, there's a moment where they think to themselves, I think I could do that. And I had opportunities when I was an undergrad to do it. I did my undergrad at Harvard, and I did not go there to study music. I went there to study political science. but there was a very vibrant music scene on campus, and most of it was student directed. So there's a great historic conducting teacher named Max Rudolph who said, the best way to learn how to conduct is to conduct. Nobody forces you to become a conductor for very good reason. It is a patently irrational career path, and nobody can quite articulate what makes great conducting. But the way you start to do it is you convince your friends who play instruments to sit in front of you. You know, you bribe them with pizza.
Yeah.
And you stand up there and you start waving your arms and you make all the mistakes. And you hope that they're your friends and that they understand. And you keep on going and you keep making more mistakes and more mistakes until you start to feel a little bit more comfortable in your own skin up there in front of this group of musicians who've been playing their instruments for years and in some cases decades longer than you've been waving your arms. You're waving your arms to represent sound. How preposterous is that in a way? And yet you have a sound in your head. You're trying to show through silent physical movement what that sound means, and you're trying to inspire the people in front of you to emulate the sound that starts off in your head. So that was what I did in undergrad. Eventually I realized that music was the only thing that I could do. I couldn't envision myself doing anything else.
So politics was to the side.
Yes, politics was to the side by the time I was 21. And I went to graduate school. You can go to graduate school for orchestral conducting. I spent 2 years there. It was like boot camp.
Okay.
I spent my summers at music festivals in Aspen and Tanglewood and some other beautiful places where the classical music community gathers in the off season. And then I got my first job conducting a middle school orchestra at the New England Conservatory Preparatory School at 8:30 on Saturday mornings in Boston. It was cold in January and February, getting up and riding the train to work. And then after a year of doing that, I was very, very fortunate to win my first job as assistant conductor of the Kansas City Symphony, where I spent 4 years. And then at the end of that, a month before my contract expired, I was offered the job of music director of the Knoxville Symphony.
So let's talk about your trek here. And I love your story, your path to becoming a conductor. Wonderful insight. You come to Knoxville. How does one put their stamp on a symphony orchestra? When you come, because you got to have some stuff in your head where you're like, this is what I want to see. This is what I want to do. I
think what's really important is you don't come in first and foremost with the mindset of putting your stamp on anything. I think, when you're a leader of an artistic organization, when you're a leader of any organization that has a history of its own, it's not about you first and foremost. You're a steward of something that has existed long before your arrival, and if you're doing your job right, will exist and thrive long after your departure. And you're in terms of an arts nonprofit, you're not only a steward of the organization, but you're a steward of the community that supports the organization, all of the people that go into making this orchestra a reality, all of the musicians that are a part of the orchestra, all of the staff working behind the scenes to make the product on stage happen, the board members who lead through their time and their generosity, the donors, and perhaps most importantly, the audience. A symphony orchestra is a reflection of the community that it's in, and a symphony orchestra is only as strong as the audience that is there to support them. And that's what, we're here for the audience ultimately. We're here to bring music to people, to bring that joy, to bring that enrichment, and to bring that education to people. So when I arrive, I'm starting out listening more than anything, and it makes sense. Conducting is a listening art form at the very beginning. If you're not listening to the orchestra, you are sunk, and there's no way that you can inspire, influence, suggest anything up from the podium. So I arrive, I'm trying to learn, okay, what is this ecosystem that I am going to become a part of, and where am I meeting everybody? And then once you have the beginnings of that understanding, and you begin to establish a certain level of trust with all of these people that are opening their arms to you and welcoming you into the fold and looking for some direction. Then you start to think, okay, what can I bring to this? And how can I, what do I believe strongly in as an artist? What do I believe strongly will work well in this community, in this place? And how can I win hearts and minds over to my perspective?
Yes. Do you have a favorite event or program that you all put on?
Oh, goodness. I have a lot of favorite programs that we do. I mean, so on our, for us as performers of classical music, our bread and butter is our Moxcar Marketing and Communications Masterwork series, which happens 8 times a year in the Tennessee Theater, and that's where we perform. That's where we're performing Beethoven and Tchaikovsky and Mahler and Stravinsky and all of the great luminaries of the history of classical music, alongside a lot of new music, a lot of new composers, living composers of diverse backgrounds. So with that, it's, I could pick out dozens upon dozens of programs that stand out to me, depending on the specific music that was on the program. But in terms of concerts that are an annual thing that really stand out, I really love our July 4th concert.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I
I've been
love
to
our
that one.
July.
That's a good
I love
one.
our July 4th concert, and one of the main reasons that I love it is, thousands and thousands of people come out to it. For so many people, that is going to be their one point of contact with any symphony orchestra over the course of their entire year. But they do it every year, and it's important to them, and they look forward to it. And there is such a great responsibility that goes into that as a performer, because it's like, this might for some child that's out on the lawn,
Right.
this might be the memory of a symphony orchestra that sticks with them 25 years down the road, when a friend or a colleague says to them, I have an extra ticket to the East Oshkosh Symphony, do you want to come with me? So, it might not seem like, it's usually hot.
Yeah.
We're usually sweating. It might not seem like the most glamorous thing, but that level of community is kind of what it's all about and what we're here to do.
Last year I got the chance to take my kids to the music from the movies. We saw the Harry Potter performance that you all did, and it made, in my opinion as a mom, it made the symphony touchable. It made it not as exclusive as you would
Yes.
think when you think of the symphony. You got to tell me you enjoyed that one, because that was amazing.
So I firmly believe that symphonic music, classical music, but symphonic music as a whole, because symphony orchestras can do a lot more than the classical repertoire, I believe it is for everybody. And I believe that we as performers and we as an industry can do a better job at communicating that, both verbally but also by example, and that's what we're trying to do here at the KSO. And one of the ways that we're doing that is to offer music give people a broad array of options, of gateways into the music. Sometimes it's coming to the Tennessee Theater and seeing what looks like a more traditional classical music concert, even though we're trying to do things that kind of poke at that tradition a little bit. It can be coming to the Civic Auditorium and seeing us do Harry Potter with live orchestra, or we just did Empire Strikes Back with live orchestra. It can be one of the many community offerings that we do with small ensembles, where we're really bringing the music right to the people. Like, I'm talking, 4 feet away between the musicians and the audience, whether that is in children's libraries with our musical story time concerts, or in hospitals through our music and wellness program, in classrooms through our Meet the Musicians program. Education is such an essential aspect of what we do at the KSO. And I think one of the keys for me, it's like you said, is finding ways to make this feel familiar, even when it's not necessarily obvious that it is. The great composers and the great pieces of music have this little magic where even if you've never heard it for the first time, it's written in a way where you can sit there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and it begins to feel familiar over the course of you listening to it. I think in a lot of what music is different from the other art forms because it demands your attention and it demands your silence for longer periods of time than other art forms. You know, you're at a museum, you can look at a painting, and if you like it, you can stare at it for as long as you want. If it's not quite hitting,
Keep on walking.
keep on walking to the next exhibit. Where if you're sitting and a book, page 5, not for you, put it back on the shelf. You're at a concert hall, you're sitting, listening. Usually the pieces are at least 10 minutes and more. You're there, and it's hard to if it's not for you, it's hard to get up and walk away. So
I thought about that.
Yeah, and so I think the more insight we can give people as performers, and the more excited on the front end we can make people, the better the experience is going to be for everybody. And I think one of the ways is talking about the music, showing people how a lot of this music actually already is a part of our day-to-day lives that we just don't realize. I mean, classical music and symphonic music still so much is the soundtrack of our lives, of entertainment, oftentimes in the background, but it's there. And even if it's music that you haven't necessarily heard before, what the music is about, these composers were very, very human. The emotions that both go into the music and that the music is designed to elicit out of all of us, those are universal. And we don't talk about those universal shared emotional experiences that we all have enough. And I think one of the really wonderful parts about orchestras, about orchestra concerts, is it does give us a chance to get a little quiet and to spend some time with parts of ourselves that may be blocked out by the din and the bustle of day-to-day life in 2025. And then also, it's one of the few experiences that we have left where we can share it with hundreds, if not thousands, of other people who we might not even know, but a shared passion together in the same space. Not a digital space, but in the same physical space. I mean, music, sporting events, worship communities. That's about it in our modern society.
That's true. That's true. What moves you? What song gets you every time? What piece, I should say.
You can say song, you can say piece. We do a lot of stuff with vocalists. That is actually kind of an easy answer.
Okay.
There's a lot of pieces that move me every time to a great deal, but anybody that knows me well, and particularly anybody that's worked with me, is not going to be surprised by this answer. Aaron Copland's Appalachian Spring Suite. It is it's a piece that's very special to me. And the music speaks for itself. It's a suite drawn from a ballet about a young husband and wife setting out on the frontier and building their lives together. But it's really it's about sort of the grandeur of simple things and the sense of gratitude for the small communities of people that we hold the dearest in our lives, that we face life's uncertainties with. Mm-hmm. And the ending of it represents, after the trials and tribulations, after their wedding, they're finally at their homestead looking out onto the night sky, and it's just the two of them. And they just put their hands on each other's shoulders and they look to the future.
let me go listen to this, because you have painted a picture. You have painted a picture. What's the hardest part of your job? Like what? Because we all have it. So don't tell me like, oh, I love it all. I get up at 2:30 in the morning. That's probably the hardest part of my job. What's yours?
The hardest part of my job. The hardest part of my job, time management. That's a pretty relatable.
It's universal.
That's a pretty universal, relatable thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is being a music director. Let me take myself out. Being a musician is far more than a 40-hour-a-week job, and you can't really put a number on it because you can always practice more, or in my case, you can always study more.
Right.
You can always pursue a higher degree of excellence. But in terms of me, there's a lot about my job that is one or two steps away from the music also. There is all of the, I respond to a lot of emails like everybody else.
I can only imagine.
There's all of the planning work. There is all of the personnel management aspect of it. There's the publicity and media aspect. You're sitting down and talking to folks like you and sharing the story of the symphony and sharing the story of music.
Thank you for your 30 to 45 minutes.
Of course,
appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. But so there's all of that. There's the administrative management side of the job, and any amount of time being spent on that is not being spent with my head and my heart in the music also. And I always want to be in the music as much as I can. So I think trying to keep that in balance when there's no limit to the demands on you in either of those buckets is something that needs to be handled with care. And also, the work for me in that regard, besides the actual work, is to not beat myself up if one bucket is getting more than the other at a certain point in time, because they're both very important.
I think we've all felt that one.
Yeah.
We've all felt that one. When you look at the way culture is right now, there's such an emphasis on STEAM and STEM and engineering. How do you combat that as somebody who is a lover of the arts and emphasizing the importance of the arts right here in East Tennessee?
Well, I don't try to think of it. It's not a combative thing.
Okay.
I think
so. Not a competition.
No. I don't think. I guess when you're talking about what resources go where, there's a scarce amount of resources. But you said STEM, but then you also said STEAM, and that A right there in STEAM is arts. I think that music and the arts in general, but music's my thing, so I'll talk about music. I think that music goes in seamlessly with the core four subjects, and there are a couple of arguments that I make for music, and I'm not going to get into whether music affects test scores and all of that. I don't know. I'm not well read enough on that. Music teaches young people skills that can apply in anything they choose to pursue, whether it's an artistic pursuit or the sciences or communications or what have you, because music teaches you the art of listening. Like I said before, this is a listening art form. Listening, which is something that we just don't do enough of in our modern world.
We don't have attention spans for it.
We don't have attention spans for it. Music teaches you work ethic. It teaches you that practice can turn into positive results, given enough patience and enough dedication. It teaches you how to stand up in front of a group of people and present and perform. And it teaches you how to work with a team. Almost all forms of music involve working with other people, where you're both simultaneously listening to what they have to offer and contributing to what you have to offer and finding common ground, finding middle ground. It teaches you emotional intelligence, I think, joy. Some of my greatest moments of ecstatic joy have come with making music. It teaches you social skills, building relationships. All of my best friends in the world are people that I shared musical experience with, most of them in high school, actually, and those relationships have endured. So, those translate to anything that you might do. And then on another level, and this is not necessarily, this is something for the adults, not for the kids. If you're a kid like me, or when I was a kid, if you were a kid like me, music gave you a sense of belonging and a sense of personal confidence and ownership of something grade school's tough. Grade school is really tough. It's tough to know where you belong, and you're trying to figure out who you are. I was never going to be an athlete. I was not going to find my team out on the field or on the court. But I did find my team in the orchestra room and in the choir room. And that made me look forward to going to school almost every day.
I hear you. I'm not an athletic person whatsoever. I went to a magnet school for visual art, and that was my team.
Yep.
That was my team. Why Knoxville? You've been here. I mean, you look at your resume, I look at the reviews. I've seen all these wonderful reviews about your conducting, and your resume is tight. Why have you been here 9 years? Why have you invested in Knoxville for all this time?
Well, I mean, you start out here. Well, first of all, I wouldn't have applied to this job if I didn't see that there was great music to be made here. And I think it was the vibe of the community that was the first thing that drew me to here when I was still a candidate. Actually, I don't know if I've ever shared this story publicly, actually, but when I was just a music director candidate, about 8 months before I was supposed to come in and do my official audition week, I kind of quietly parachuted into town, and I was just like, I'm just gonna hang out here for a little while, with nobody knows I'm around, and see how the city feels. And it was a city with an artistic pulse to it. And it was a city of people that I could tell clearly loved being in Knoxville and being a part of Knoxville. And so that was my initial, okay, I can work with this. And then as far as why I've stayed, I've stayed because I'm having a great time, because I love the people that I work with. I love the audience that we have, and the audience that we have been able to build over this time. The new people that we've attracted to the symphony, and the new perspectives I feel like that we have helped bring to symphony lifers. And this is people in Knoxville, I think, don't realize how great an orchestra, how great a group of musicians we have for a city of this population. It is, you can go to cities quite a bit more populous than this and not find an orchestra of the quality of the Knoxville Symphony. And there's still great work to be done. And I want to be here and be a part of it when that work comes to fruition. We've continued to raise the bar over the course of the last 9+ years. And, I'm grateful to the people here that they have the confidence in me to keep going. I feel like, I still have my part to play. And I'm really grateful that synergy with all of those various constituencies that music director works with seem to feel the same way.
I love that. What's next? What's next for the symphony orchestra? What's the big picture for you?
Oh my goodness, the big picture. Well, next season, the 25-26 season, is a big one. It is the 90th anniversary of the symphony. And that's not 75, it's not 100, but it's still a milestone.
90s, yeah,
it's still a milestone, and we've got some pretty big plans for our 90th anniversary season, which I can't really talk about right now, unfortunately,
You want to give me like a little sneak peek?
So I'll give you a little sneak peek.
Okay.
Yes. The way that we are going to be celebrating the 90th anniversary, it's not going to be about looking back at our past. It's going to be about looking forward to our future and to the future of the art form. And that's going to be reflected in the programming and in some of the projects that we're putting together. So people will hear more about that very soon when we announce that season, and there'll be some rolling announcements. What else? At the end of this season, we're going to be premiering a piece that's kind of emblematic of what we've been trying to do here. We've commissioned a composer named Derek Sky to write a new piece for West African Drum and Orchestra, which we're going to be presenting in collaboration with one of our members of our extended artistic family, is the way I like to think of it. Obayana Ajanaku and his professional ensemble, Indigenous Vibes, who we've performed with a number of times over the course of the last couple of years. And
I don't think of the symphony and drums together.
You do not think of it, but you know what? It works. And I've heard, I've heard the early mock-ups of this new piece, and it's going to be something to behold. And that's going to be on our last set of Moxcar Masterworks concerts in May. So that's another big project that's been in the pipeline for the last 2 years. Really looking forward to that.
That's phenomenal.
And our usual slate of offerings, which is just kind of, there's a nonstop churn to what we do between September and May when we're performing. I always say, between September and May, you pretty much look around any corner in Knoxville and you find the Knoxville Symphony not that far away. We are presenting things on nearly every weekend of every month, and then with so many community appearances throughout the week, during weekdays, it's just it just the wheel keeps on turning, and then we will go off for the summer to various festivals, and our musicians will go off to various festivals and places to continue making music in a slightly lower intensity setting, and then we come back in September. And you mentioned what are my favorite events. So we've been starting off the year very early on. We always perform on Market Square, which I love, and then we've been doing an event at the Knoxville Botanical Garden and Arboretum very early on, where it's sort of like a walking tour, choose your own adventure concert, where we've got different small ensembles from the orchestra positioned in different gardens throughout the botanical gardens with simultaneous performances. People can wander and enjoy music surrounded by just beautiful natural setting, and that's really where the season feels like it begins for me. And it's a completely free event. So many of our events are either free or very, very affordable. We make a point of trying to keep ticket costs as low as possible so that financial barriers are not a factor for anybody that wants to dip into this beautiful music.
And we thank you for that. We really do. Aram, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me. Thank you for your leadership, and I wish you so much success for the 90th year.
Thank you so much.
Orchestra.